They say blood is thicker than water. But in the corporate world, ink is thicker than blood. And red ink, that's the thickest of all. Most men, when faced with betrayal by their own father, would scream. They would shout. They would cause a scene in the lobby that everyone would talk about for years. But Jason didn't scream. When his father, the CEO of Sterling Logistics, pointed to the door and told him to get out, Jason didn't say a word. He just looked at his watch. He looked at his watch because he knew something his father didn't. He knew that time was no longer on their side. Robert Sterling, the patriarch, thought he was firing a disrespectful son. He thought he was teaching a lesson in humility. He thought he was handing the keys to the kingdom to his favorite son, Kyle, the golden child who had never worked a real day in his life. Robert didn't know that by firing Jason without severance, he had just voided the only legal document protecting his company from Jason's knowledge. He didn't know that Jason wasn't just walking out to the parking lot. He was walking straight into the arms of Sterling Logistics' biggest competitor. Robert Sterling wanted a war. He just didn't realize he had already armed the enemy. This is the story of a man who was thrown to the wolves, only to return leading the pack. To understand the collapse, you have to understand the foundation. Sterling Logistics was a mid-sized freight empire. 30 years ago, Robert Sterling built it from a single truck into a regional powerhouse. He was a man of the old school, hard handshake, loud voice, and a belief that fear was the best management tool. But the industry had changed. By the time Jason joined the company 10 years ago, Sterling Logistics was bleeding. They were using paper logs in a digital world. Their fleet was aging. Their margins were razor thin. Jason was the fixer. He wasn't the loud one at the dinner table. He was the one in the back office until 9 p.m. He digitized the supply chain. He renegotiated the union contracts. He implemented the tracking software that saved the company $3 million in fuel costs in a single year. For 5 years, Jason essentially ran the company, while Robert took the credit. And then there was Kyle. Kyle was Jason's younger brother. If Jason was the engine, Kyle was the hood ornament, shiny, expensive, and completely useless for moving the car forward. Kyle was the VP of Client Relations, a title Robert invented, so Kyle could expense golf trips and steak dinners. The friction started when Apex Global, a massive international conglomerate, began sniffing around the region. Apex was eating up small logistics companies left and right. Jason saw the writing on the wall. He drafted a proposal: modernize aggressively, cut overhead, and prepare for a strategic merger. It was a smart play. It would have secured Robert's retirement and the employees' jobs. But Robert didn't want to hear it. He saw the proposal as an insult. He saw it as his son trying to sell his legacy. And Kyle whispered in Robert's ear, "Jason thinks you're old, Dad. Jason thinks you're weak. I can run operations. I can do what he does." That was the lie that started the fire. The explosion happened on a Tuesday morning, the weekly board meeting. Jason was halfway through a presentation on Q3 logistics data when Robert slammed his hand on the mahogany table. "Enough," Robert barked. The room went dead silent. The other board members, mostly old friends of Robert's who liked their dividends and hated change, looked down at their notepads. "I'm tired of these spreadsheets, Jason," Robert said, his face flushing red. "I built this company with grit, not with computers. You try and turn Sterling Logistics into some soulless corporation. You don't respect the name on the building." Jason kept his cool. "Dad, the data shows that if we don't pivot, Apex Global will price us out of the market in 6 months. We're losing the Amazon contract. We are not losing anything," Robert shouted. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. "The problem isn't the market. The problem is you. You're negative. Your toxicity in the well." Kyle, sitting to Robert's right, smirked. He tapped his pen on the table. "I agree, Dad. The guys in the warehouse say morale is low. They say Jason pushes too hard. It was a fabrication. The warehouse crew loved Jason because he actually knew their names. But facts didn't matter in this room. Only the narrative mattered." Robert looked at his eldest son with cold, hard eyes. "I think we need a change in leadership. Effective immediately, Kyle is taking over as Chief Operating Officer. The room gasped. Kyle, the man who once lost a $40,000 shipment because he forgot to check his email? And you, Jason, Robert continued, pointing a finger like a loaded gun. You're done. Clean out your desk. Hand in your badge. I want you off the property in an hour. Jason stood still. He closed his laptop. He didn't beg. He didn't ask why. If you're terminating me without cause, Jason said calmly, his voice steady, then per my contract, the severance package is activated. 6 months' salary, plus the vesting of my stock options. Robert laughed. It was a cruel, barking laugh. Severance? You think I'm paying you to fail? I'm firing you for gross insubordination. That's cause, Jason. You get nothing. No severance. No stock. No payout. Sue me if you want. I'll bury you in legal fees until you're bankrupt. This was the moment. The pivot point. Robert thought he was being a tough negotiator. In reality, he was committing suicide. Jason nodded slowly. Okay. No severance. You're breaching the contract. Get out. Robert yelled. Jason walked out of the boardroom. He walked to his office, placed his key card on the desk, and picked up a single cardboard box. As he walked through the bullpen, the staff watched in silence. They knew. They knew the brain of the company was leaving. In the parking lot, Kyle caught up to him. Don't worry, bro. Kyle sneered, leaning against Jason's sedan. I'll take good care of your office. Might need to redecorate, though. It smells like desperation in there. Jason opened his car door. He looked at Kyle, not with anger, but with pity. Make sure you check the load-bearing limits on the north warehouse, Kyle, Jason said quietly. It's due for inspection next week. Yeah, whatever. Kyle waved him off. Go cry to Mom. Jason drove away. He didn't go to his mother's house. He didn't go to a bar. He pulled into a lay-by, took out his phone, and made one call. This is Jason Sterling. Tell the CEO of Apex Global I'm ready to talk. And tell him I'm legally free. The non-compete clause in Jason's contract was ironclad. It stated that for 2 years after termination, he could not work for a competitor within 500 miles. But a non-compete is a two-way street. It relies on the contract being honored. By refusing to pay the severance outlined in that same contract, Robert Sterling had committed a material breach. He had broken the deal. The contract was now toilet paper. The next morning, Jason sat in a glass office on the 40th floor of the Apex Global headquarters. Across from him sat Marcus Thorne, the regional director of Apex. Thorne was a shark, cold, efficient, and notoriously ruthless. I heard about the exit, Thorne said, sliding a coffee across the obsidian desk. Messy. Necessary, Jason replied. So, Thorne leaned back. Why shouldn't I just wait for your father's company to implode? Why do I need you? Because if you wait, Jason said, Robert will sell off the assets piecemeal to save his retirement. You'll get the scraps. If you hire me, I can deliver the whole infrastructure intact. But I don't want to come on as a consultant. Thorne raised an eyebrow. What do you want? I want to lead the acquisition, Jason said. And I want full autonomy on the strategy. Thorne looked at Jason for a long moment. He saw the fire in his eyes. It wasn't just business anymore. It was correction. We can't hire you to acquire them, Jason. That looks like a conflict of interest, Thorne said, a small smile playing on his lips. However, Apex recently purchased a portfolio of distressed commercial debt from Liberty Bank. Sterling Logistics has a $10 million credit line in that portfolio. Jason realized what Thorne was saying. Apex hadn't just been watching Sterling Logistics. They had bought their debt. They were the bank. I'm hiring you as our senior auditor for distressed assets, Thorne said. Your job isn't to buy your father's company. Your job is to audit it for solvency. If they miss a single covenant, if they slip up even 1 inch, we call the loan. We foreclose. Jason took the pen. He signed a contract. The wolf was now wearing the shepherd's clothing. The next 6 months were a slow-motion car crash for Sterling Logistics. Jason watched it all from a distance. He didn't intervene. He didn't warn them. He simply monitored the data streams that Kyle was too incompetent to secure. Under Kyle's leadership, the efficiency Jason had built evaporated. Kyle ignored the maintenance schedules. 2 trucks broke down on the highway, resulting in massive late fees from clients. Then came the big one. Kyle wanted to land a whale to prove to his father that he was better than Jason. He bid on a massive contract for a frozen food distributor. To win the bid, Kyle undercut the price by 15%. Jason, sitting in his Apex office, saw the bid. He ran the numbers. At that price, with Sterling's current fuel costs, they would lose money on every single mile. It was mathematical suicide. Jason watched as Kyle won the contract. He watched as Robert threw a champagne party to celebrate the new era of Sterling Logistics. 2 months later, the reality hit. The frozen food contract was draining the company's cash reserves dry. They couldn't afford the fuel. They started delaying payments to vendors. Then, they started delaying payments to the bank. That was the signal. Sterling Logistics missed a loan interest payment on the 1st of the month. A technical default. Robert scrambled. He called the bank, Liberty Bank, to ask for an extension. He didn't know that Liberty Bank had sold the loan to Apex Global. He didn't know that his request for an extension wasn't going to a loan officer. It was going to Jason's inbox. Jason waited 3 days. He let the fear marinate. Then, he had his secretary send the email. To Robert Sterling, CEO, Sterling Logistics from Apex Global/Asset Recovery Division subject. Notice of default and immediate audit. Mr. Sterling, due to the missed payment on loan reference number 4492, the creditor is exercising its right to an immediate, on-site forensic audit to determine the solvency of the collateral. The audit team will arrive on Monday at 9 a.m. Failure to cooperate will result in immediate acceleration of the full debt. Robert didn't know Jason was the auditor. The email was signed by the Office of Special Assets. Robert assumed Apex was coming to buy him out. In his delusional mind, he thought, okay, we missed a payment, but we have this big frozen food contract. Apex sees the value. They're coming to make an offer. I can still cash out. He told Kyle to get the boardroom ready. Clean everything up, Robert ordered. Wear your best suit. We're going to sell this place for $20 million and retire to Florida. They spent the weekend polishing the brass on the Titanic. Monday morning, 8:55 a.m. The Sterling Logistics parking lot was gray and drizzling. Robert and Kyle stood in the lobby, flanked by their bewildered HR manager and a few nervous secretaries. They looked like royalty waiting for a parade. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Then another. Then a third. Here they come, Robert said, straightening his tie. Remember, Kyle, let me do the talking. We asked for $25 million. The doors of the lead SUV opened. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. Apex corporate lawyers. They held the doors open for the lead auditor. A polished black Oxford shoe hit the pavement. Then the sharp crease of a navy blue bespoke suit. Jason Sterling stepped out of the car. He looked different. He was leaner, sharper. He wasn't wearing the off-the-rack shirts he used to wear as the operations manager. He looked like money. He looked like power. Kyle's jaw dropped. What? What is he doing here? Robert stepped forward, confused anger bubbling up. Jason, what the hell is this? Did you come to beg for your job back right before the meeting? Get security. Jason didn't stop walking. He walked straight toward the glass doors, the lawyers flanking him like Dobermans. I'm not here for a job, Robert, Jason said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the lobby. I'm here for the audit. You? Robert laughed, but it was a nervous sound. You're auditing us? You don't work for the bank. One of the lawyers stepped forward, holding a thick file. Mr. Sterling, your loan was acquired by Apex Global 6 months ago. Jason Sterling is the Senior Vice President of Distressed Assets for Apex. He is the authorized representative of your creditor, and you are currently trespassing in his way. The color drained from Robert's face so fast it looked like he might faint. Kyle looked like he was going to vomit. Shall we go to the boardroom? Jason asked. I know the way. The boardroom smelled of expensive coffee and fear. Robert and Kyle sat on one side of the table, huddled together. Jason sat on the other side, alone. The lawyer stood by the door. Jason opened a sleek leather folder. He didn't look at his father. He looked at the papers. "Let's begin," Jason said. "Jason, son," Robert started, his voice trembling. "Look, I know we left things poorly, but this is business. We can work this out. Apex wants to buy us, right? Let's talk price." Jason finally looked up. His eyes were cold. "You're under a misconception, Robert. Apex isn't here to buy Sterling Logistics. We don't buy broken companies. We liquidate them." "Broken?" Kyle squeaked. "We have a frozen foods contract. It's worth millions." Jason pulled a single sheet of paper from his file and slid it across the table. "I audited that contract," Jason said. "You're losing 4 cents on every mile. You've burned through 60% of your cash reserves in 3 months servicing it. You aren't profitable, Kyle. You're bleeding to death." Jason slid another paper. "And here," Jason pointed, "this is a record of the company credit card. Robert, you've charged $50,000 in consulting fees to a shell company in your name since I left. That's embezzlement. That's fraud." Robert sputtered. That was for retirement planning. It's a breach of the loan covenants." Jason cut him off. "And it's a crime." Jason closed the folder. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "Here is the reality," Jason said, leaning forward. "Because of the default, the fraud, and the gross mismanagement, Apex is accelerating the debt. You owe us $10 million. Today, we don't have $10 million. Robert cried out. "I know," Jason said. "Which means we are seizing the collateral, the trucks, the warehouses, the brand, everything. As of this moment, Sterling Logistics belongs to Apex Global." "You can't do this," Kyle shouted, standing up. "This is our family company." Jason stood up too. He was taller than Kyle. He loomed over him. "It was a family company," Jason said softly, "when I ran it. But you wanted to play the big shot, Kyle. You wanted the title. Well, now you have the consequences." Jason turned to the lawyers. "Have security escort the former management off the premises. I want the locks changed by noon." The walk out of the building was the longest of Robert Sterling's life. 6 months ago, he had watched his son walk away with a cardboard box, smug in his victory. Now, the employees, the drivers, the dispatchers, the secretaries, stood and watched as Robert and Kyle were escorted out by uniformed guards. There was no applause. There were no boos. Just silence. The crushing weight of judgment. Robert tried to stop at his car, but the guard shook his head. "Company vehicle, sir. It's been seized. You'll need to call a cab." Robert stood on the curb, stripping the Rolex off his wrist to put in his pocket, looking at the building he built, the building he lost because he couldn't swallow his pride. Up on the second floor, behind the glass of the CEO's office, Jason stood watching. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel happiness. He felt relief. The toxicity was gone. The cancer had been cut out. His phone buzzed. It was Marcus Thorne from Apex. "Is it done?" Thorne asked. "It's done," Jason replied. "Good work," Thorne said. "We're keeping the name, by the way. Sterling Logistics has good brand recognition. We're putting you in charge of the rebuild. You're the CEO now, Jason." Jason looked at the empty desk where his father used to sit. He picked up the world's greatest boss mug that Kyle had bought for Robert as a joke. Jason dropped the mug into the trash can. "Understood," Jason said. "I'll get to work." Robert Sterling lost everything. His equity was wiped out to pay the debt. He avoided jail time for the embezzlement only because Jason refused to press charges, a final act of mercy that hurt Robert more than prison would have. He lives in a small condo now, complaining to anyone who will listen about how his son stole his legacy. Kyle couldn't find work in logistics. Word travels fast. The last anyone heard, he was selling timeshares 2 towns over. As for Jason, he didn't just save the company. He doubled it. He hired back the people Robert had fired. He reinstated the severance packages. He built a company where competence mattered more than blood. There's a lesson here. Arrogance creates a blind spot. Robert Sterling thought he could crush his son because he held the title. He forgot that titles are given, but respect is earned. He threw his son to the wolves, hoping he would be eaten. He never stopped to think that maybe, Just maybe, the wolf was the one person keeping the pack fed. And when you starve the wolf, eventually, he comes for you. This is the Vindication Reporter, signing off.